They refused to help me attend college, but years later anticipated I'd hand over $150,000 for my sister's dream wedding. I grew up in a small town in a simple two-story house with my parents and my older sister Elise, who was just 2 years older than me. Sometimes, though, it felt like we lived in entirely different worlds. My father ran a small cafe that earned enough to keep us comfortable, while mother stayed home and occasionally assisted at the restaurant. It wasn't a lavish life, but we managed. Well, most of us did. Elise, sweetheart, that presentation was absolutely brilliant. I recall mother raving one evening after a school event. You're going to go so far in life. You're just so gifted. I stood in the doorway, still clutching my own certificate from the science fair, but nobody noticed. It was always like that. Elise was the star, and I was the shadow. That was the pattern of my childhood. Elise got the latest iPhone while I inherited her old one with the cracked screen. She wore designer clothes while I got her hand-me-downs. Every family gathering became a display of Elise's accomplishments. Did you hear about Elise's SAT scores? Father would proudly tell our relatives. Top percentile, and she's president of the debate club too. I learned to fade into the background during these conversations, knowing my straight A's and role as treasurer of the environmental club wouldn't earn a mention. It wasn't that I was struggling. I was doing fine. But in our house, fine was as good as failure. Clara, mother said once while I helped her fold laundry, you should really consider practical career paths, maybe something in retail or service. There's nothing wrong with honest work. The words hurt, but I'd grown accustomed to the constant reminders of my supposed limitations. What I hadn't accepted was how they seemed to actively reinforce them. Looking back, I realized those early years set the stage for everything that followed. The endless comparisons, the subtle put-downs, the clear message that I was somehow less than my sister. It all left scars that would take years to heal. But sometimes, the deepest wounds fuel the strongest motivations, and my family had no idea how their treatment would eventually shape our futures. I still remember the day Elise got her college acceptance letter. The house erupted in celebration. Mother made her favorite dinner. Father brought home a costly bottle of wine, and they spent the evening planning her future. Our brilliant girl is going to one of the finest colleges in the city, Mother beamed. We've been saving for this moment since you were born, sweetheart. I sat quietly at the dinner table, pushing food around my plate, trying to imagine my own celebration in 2 years. I should have known better. When my turn came, the response couldn't have been more different. I'd worked hard to maintain good grades, joined clubs, and took extra courses to strengthen my college applications, but none of it mattered. College. Mother's laugh was sharp and dismissive when I raised the topic. Clara, be realistic. We can't afford to send you to college. Besides, you're not really college material. But what about the money you saved for Elise? I asked, my voice trembling. Father cleared his throat uncomfortably. That was different. Elise had a clear path, exceptional grades. You're better suited for practical work. Speaking of which, I could use another waitress at the cafe. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I could work while studying, I pleaded. Please, just help me get started. We could borrow from relatives or take out a loan. I'll repay every cent with interest. I'll even get it in writing with a lawyer. We never borrow from anyone, on principle, Mother said coldly. We're not changing our principles for you. You need to accept your limits and find a suitable job. I spent that night crying in my room, but by morning, determination had replaced my tears. I went to the only people who had ever truly seen me, my grandparents. Grandpa, Grandma, I need your help. I explained through tears at their kitchen table. I can't just give up on college. Grandpa's eyes held a mix of anger and sadness. We don't have savings, sweetheart, but let me see what I can do. No grandchild of mine will have their dreams crushed like this. The next few weeks were an emotional roller coaster. First, the disappointment of the bank rejecting the loan application, then the shocking moment when Grandpa announced he was selling their old country house and its land. The sale provided just enough for my college tuition. I applied to study investment management in a city far from home, as distant as I could get from the constant reminders of my family's lack of faith in me. The day I left, my parents didn't even say goodbye. Only my grandparents stood at the bus station, Grandma hugging me tightly, while Grandpa wiped away tears he pretended weren't there. From that day, I cut ties with my parents completely. During breaks, I stayed with my grandparents in their now smaller house. Their sacrifice meant everything, and every time I walked into their modest home, I was reminded of what true family support looked like. After 4 years of hard work, I graduated with my degree in investment management. I returned to my hometown with big dreams and a fresh diploma, but reality hit hard. The job market wasn't kind to new graduates, and I spent weeks sending applications without promising responses. Eventually, I landed a position at a small trading company. It wasn't the renowned investment firm I'd envisioned, but it was a start. I found a simple apartment on the outskirts of town, nothing fancy, but it was mine, paid for with my own money. Then came the call I never expected. Clara, Elise's voice was sugar-sweet on the phone. It's been ages. Come over for dinner this weekend. I'd love to catch up. Something in her tone should have warned me, but I agreed, hoping time had changed things, that we could finally have a real relationship as adults. I couldn't have been more wrong. When I arrived at Elise's house, I knew I'd walked into a trap. My parents were there, along with Elise's boyfriend, a slick-looking guy in an expensive suit who barely acknowledged me. The interrogation began as we sat down to eat. So, Clara, Mother started, her fork poised midair. Tell us about this job of yours. I'm working at a trading company, I said, keeping my voice steady. It's small, but Elise cut in with a laugh. Trading company? You mean like those discount stores? Honestly, you didn't need a college degree for that. Anyone could walk in off the street and get that job. Unlike Elise, Mother beamed, who's a manager at the city bank. And Daniel here is a lawyer with Anderson and Pierce. Elise's boyfriend nodded smugly. Top law firm in the state. I told you college wasn't necessary for you, dear, Mother sighed. Such a waste of your grandfather's property. Father chuckled, swirling his wine glass. Hey, my offer still stands. I could use an educated waitress at the cafe. Think how impressed the customers would be. Would you like fries with that? From someone with a college degree. They all laughed, except me. I stared at my plate, pushing food around like I did as a child. Where did you say you're living now? Elise asked, though I hadn't mentioned it. I found a place on Cedar Street, I replied quietly. The table erupted in theatrical gasps. Cedar Street. Elise's eyes widened in mock concern. Oh, Clara, that's literally the worst neighborhood in the city. Only, she paused for effect. Well, you know, people who can't afford better live there. Beggars, Mother stage whispered. She means beggars. And they laughed again. Something inside me snapped. For years, the distance hadn't changed them. They were still the same cruel, judgmental people. You know what? I stood abruptly, my chair scraping loudly. I'd rather be a beggar than be like any of you. I spat out. At least I got where I am on my own, without riding someone else's coattails or living off Daddy's money. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, ignoring their protests and accusations as I walked into the night. I promised myself it would be the last time I'd ever be in their presence. Life has a funny way of surprising you just when you think you've hit a dead end. I was still at the small trading company, feeling stuck, when my phone rang one afternoon. It was Emma, my old college roommate. Clara, you won't believe this, she said, practically shouting with excitement. Remember how we dreamed of working for Maxwell Investment Group? They're opening an office in your city and looking for fresh talent. I already put in a good word for you. My heart raced. Maxwell was a top name in investment management. I spent that night updating my resume and the next week preparing for the interview. Walking into their temporary office, I felt like everything in my life had led to this moment. The interview was tough. They grilled me on market trends and investment strategies, but all those extra hours at my job and research in my free time paid off. A week later, I got the call. I was in. From day one, I threw myself into the work. While others left at 5, I stayed late, developing new strategies and refining proposals. My first major project, managing a portfolio for a mid-sized tech company, yielded a 40% return in the first quarter. People noticed. Clara, this is exceptional work, my supervisor said during my 6-month review, along with a bonus larger than my previous year's salary. But I worked harder, took on bigger projects, and built a reputation for turning struggling investments into gold mines. The bonuses grew, and I had a plan for every penny. 2 years after starting at Maxwell, I walked into a luxury car dealership. The salesman probably thought I was lost until I pointed to their top model and said, "I'll take that one." An hour later, I pulled up to my grandparents' house in a gleaming new car with a giant red bow. Grandpa's jaw dropped when I handed him the keys, but I wasn't done. The next month, I closed on a stunning apartment in the Heights, the city's most renowned new development. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble countertops, and a view that made you feel like you owned the city. One morning, coffee in hand, I was walking out of my building when I heard a familiar voice. Clara. Elise stood there in her designer workout gear, looking like she'd seen a ghost. What are you doing here? I took a slow sip, savoring the moment. Oh, I live here, I said casually, pointing to the penthouse level. Just bought it, actually. The look on Elise's face, disbelief, shock, and, for the first time, envy, was priceless. A week later, my phone rang. Seeing my parents' number was surprising. They hadn't called in years. Even more surprising, they were in the neighborhood and wanted to stop by. I agreed, more curious than anything. When they walked into my apartment, their expressions were priceless. Mother's eyes darted from the panoramic windows to the designer furniture, while father stood awkwardly, as if afraid to touch anything. This is quite impressive, Mother managed, running her finger along my marble counter. You must be doing very well. I am, I replied, offering them seats on my Italian leather sofa. They exchanged glances before Mother cleared her throat. We have news. Elise is engaged to Daniel. They announced it last month at the engagement party. An engagement party I hadn't been invited to, of course. They're planning the wedding for 6 months from now, Mother continued, her voice taking on that familiar wheedling tone. We've offered to pay half the expenses, as is traditional. Father shifted uncomfortably. But the total budget is, well, it's $300,000. I nearly choked on my water. $300,000. Daniel's family has certain expectations, Mother explained quickly. They're prominent in the community. We announced we'd cover half before we knew the amount, and now, she trailed off, looking at me meaningfully. Now you need $150,000, I finished. Exactly, Mother brightened. And since you're doing so well, living in this beautiful apartment, working at such a renowned firm, you want me to give you the money, I said flatly. Loan, Father interjected. We're asking for a loan. We'll pay you back, of course. We'll even get it notarized. We know it's a lot, Mother said quickly, but we can't back out now. It'd be so embarrassing with Daniel's family. They're expecting a certain standard. Like when I wanted to go to college? I interrupted. When I begged for help. When I offered to sign a legal document promising to pay you back. Mother's face flushed. That was different. Different how? Because it was me asking? Because you said you don't borrow money on principle. Clara, be reasonable, Father started. Reasonable. I stood. Like you were reasonable when you told me I wasn't college material? When you offered me a waitress job instead of helping me get an education? When you let Grandpa sell his property to help me while you saved all your money for Elise? That's not fair, Mother protested. No, what's not fair is that you're only here because you need something. You didn't invite me to the engagement party. You haven't spoken to me in years, and now you want $150,000. I walked to the door and opened it. I don't loan money on principle. I believe that's a family tradition, isn't it? Mother's face reddened with anger. How dare you throw our words back at us after everything we've done for you? Everything you've done for me. I laughed bitterly. Please leave. They stormed out, Mother muttering about ingratitude, Father avoiding eye contact. As I closed the door, I felt a weight lift. For the first time, I'd stood up to them on my terms, in my home, from a position of strength. The next day, my phone rang again. It was Elise. What is wrong with you? She said, skipping pleasantries. Mother told me what happened. How can you be so selfish? I sat back in my office chair, watching the sunset through my panoramic windows. Selfish? That's rich coming from you, Elise. We're family, Clara. Family helps each other. You have the money. Everyone knows you're doing well. Why won't you help with my wedding? I could almost laugh at the absurdity. Family? Suddenly I'm family. What about when I visited your house and you called me a beggar? When you mocked where I lived and laughed at my job? Was I family then? That was different, Elise protested. We were just teasing. You're being ridiculous. No. What's ridiculous is that none of you spoke to me for years until you needed something. If you need money so badly, ask our parents. They're your real family, after all. They made that clear enough. You bitter, ungrateful. Elise exploded. You think you're better than us now with your fancy apartment and big job. You're still the same pathetic little sister who was never good enough. The line went dead as she hung up. I sat there, surprised to find her words didn't hurt anymore. They just made me tired. A week later, I was having Sunday dinner at my grandparents' house, a tradition I'd kept since college. Grandma was unusually quiet as she served the pot roast. "Your parents called us yesterday," Grandpa said, his voice heavy. I put down my fork. "Let me guess. They asked for money for the wedding." Grandma nodded. "They're getting desperate, I think. Your mother had a lot to say about family obligations. When we told them we're retired and don't have that kind of money," Grandpa continued, "your mother suggested we sell something." She said, "Well, you sold the land for Clara's college, didn't you?" "She suggested we sell the car you gave us." I was stunned. "She actually suggested you sell your gift?" That's when I hung up on her, Grandpa said, satisfaction in his voice. "Told her that unlike some people, we don't sell gifts from family who care about us." Grandma squeezed my hand across the table. The three of us sat in understanding silence, bound by something stronger than blood. Word travels fast in a small town, and my parents ensured it traveled faster. Within weeks, their version of events spread through our extended family and social circle. I heard snippets of their narrative. "Did you hear about the younger daughter?" Mother's friend gossiped loudly at the grocery store, not realizing I was in the next aisle. "Got some fancy job and thinks she's too good for her family. Won't even speak to them. Says they're too poor for her now." At church, relatives shot disapproving glances when I visited with my grandparents. Aunt Martha called, heavy with judgment. "Your mother said you wouldn't even let her into your apartment when she visited. How could you treat your mother that way?" I could have corrected the record, told everyone how my parents only reached out when they needed money, how they'd never supported my dreams, how they demeaned me at every turn. But I'd learned long ago that defending yourself against toxic people only gives them more ammunition. Instead, I focused on my work, spent time with my grandparents, and let the gossip swirl like autumn leaves in the wind. My grandparents knew the truth. They'd lived through every moment with me, and that was enough. But with 2 weeks left before the wedding, Elise made one final attempt. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, wearing her priciest outfit and a convincing smile. "Clara, we need to talk," she said, brushing past me into the living room. "This has gone on long enough. We're sisters, we shouldn't be fighting." I stood by the window, arms crossed, watching her settle on my sofa like she owned it. "Why are you really here, Elise?" "To make peace," she said with her best pageant smile, "and to help you understand the situation. You see, Daniel's parents aren't just rich, they're old money, with connections everywhere. The wedding has to be perfect." I waited, knowing there was more. "The final payments are due next week. The restaurant deposit, the wedding planner fee, the flowers." She twisted her engagement ring nervously. "If mother and father can't contribute their share, it'll be so embarrassing. Daniel's parents will find out they couldn't afford it. It won't just reflect badly on them. It'll reflect on me, on my future with Daniel. So this isn't about reconciling. It's about the money." "Well, yes, but..." She stood and walked over, placing her hand on my arm. "Clara, please. You're my sister. I need your help. We need to impress Daniel's parents." I gently removed her hand, walked to the door, and opened it. "I don't care about impressing Daniel's parents. I don't care about your perfect wedding. And I definitely don't care what any of you think anymore. You're making a huge mistake," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "You'll regret this." I smiled, feeling genuinely at peace. "No, Elise, for the first time, I'm certain I won't." A few days later, my phone lit up with a text from Megan, Elise's college friend who'd always been kind to me. She thought I should know what happened at the country club the previous evening. "Your parents finally had to come clean to Daniel's family," she wrote. "They couldn't dodge the wedding planner calls anymore." It was quite a scene. I could picture it. The elegant country club dining room, Daniel's wealthy parents in designer clothes, the moment my parents admitted they couldn't afford their share. According to Megan, Daniel's mother turned purple with rage, but the fairy tale wedding began to unravel. The Maldives honeymoon suite, canceled. The vintage champagne order, scaled back. The designer flower arrangements, simplified. Daniel's parents covered all expenses, but the damage was done. The wedding went forward, scaled down from its original grandeur. I wasn't invited, of course, and didn't expect to be. My grandparents received an invitation but declined, sending a polite note about prior commitments. We spent that Saturday together, having a picnic in their backyard, avoiding any mention of the event across town. A week later, The wedding photos appeared on social media. I scrolled through them one evening, wine glass in hand, studying the faces in each staged shot. There was Elise in her designer gown, Daniel stiff and formal, his family arranged around him like expensive statues. My parents were easy to spot in their new outfits, likely bought on credit, trying hard to look like they belonged in this world of old money and country club memberships. But their smiles were strained, their poses awkward. Daniel's parents appeared in few photos, their expressions ranging from barely concealed disdain to outright displeasure. In one telling shot, his mother looked at my parents with an expression reserved for something unpleasant found on the bottom of a shoe. Megan texted updates occasionally in the weeks that followed. Elise and Daniel moved into a house his parents bought as a wedding gift. My parents rarely visited. Apparently, they weren't what Daniel's family envisioned for Sunday dinners. I haven't spoken to my parents or Elise since before the wedding and doubt I ever will again. But sitting in my apartment, watching the sunset paint the city sky in shades of gold, I finally feel at peace with that. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ashes.